In this video, we're going to look at the 4 relationship styles that you need to understand in order to have healthy relationships. Your attachment style is one of the biggest factors in predicting what kinds of problems you're likely to face in relationships and how you're going to interact with others. So understanding all of the attachment styles will help you understand how you respond and how your partner's likely to respond, and really allow you to deal with any discrepancies and any problems with a huge degree of empathy. So it's really, really helpful to giving you healthy relationships all the way across the board. First of all, we're going to talk about what an attachment style is. Attachment styles are ways that we learned to deal with the world when we were very young children. So as very young children, we're unable to fulfill any of our own needs by ourselves. And the adults around us have to give us all of our physical and emotional needs. They need to take care of us in terms of keeping us fed, keeping us warm, but we also need them to reassure us, to give us love and to protect us from anything that we might be scared of or anything that might be emotionally challenging for us. Our attachment style is a way of coping with whatever our parents give us. So sometimes our parents, for whatever reason, usually for the best intentions, they might not have quite fulfilled some of those needs. And that can lead us to have a different attachment style. If all of your needs were met, you probably have a secure attachment style. And we're going to go into that in a second. But there are also 3 insecure attachment styles. There is anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. And we're just going to do a whistle-stop tour through all 4 of these attachment styles, and then we can look at understanding in detail how we're going to relate to others. So we're going to start with the insecure attachment styles, and we're going to start first of all with the disorganized attachment style. Disorganized attachment is incredibly rare. There's less than 5% of the population have a disorganized attachment style, and actually attachment theory had been around for a long time before anyone was really willing to accept that attachment style existed as an independent style. It's a bit of a mismatch of the other attachment styles. It's a little bit avoidant, it's a little bit anxious, but it's really very, very difficult to cope with. And that's because a disorganized attachment style it's not that you've got components of either, it's that you're extremely insecure on both kind of ends of the spectrum. And it usually comes as a result of some form of neglect or abuse or serious trauma. A disorganized attachment style, unfortunately, isn't something that you really should be trying to tackle by yourself. It's not just a little bit of an emotional difficulty. It is quite a big problem. And so the biggest sign that you might have a disorganized attachment style, I wouldn't think about it in terms of your behavior. I would ask yourself whether you've been subjected to some form of trauma or abuse. If you have, it's worth talking to a therapist either way, because if you've been abused, a therapist is able to help and support you. You can then ask them about whether you might have a disorganized attachment style, but it really isn't something that I would recommend diagnosing by yourself from a YouTube video, however well-intentioned, or from any of the quizzes that you'll see online. So the next attachment style that we're going to look at is the anxious attachment style. Now, this is somewhere between about 20 to 25% of the population, depending on who you speak to. But none of these figures are really robust. So some people will say it's higher, some people will say it's lower. But that's a ballpark figure. And someone who has an anxious attachment style will not have had their needs met by a parent consistently, but they will have had them met quite a lot of the time. And so what they've learned is that in order to get their needs met all the time, they really need to ask, they need to push, they need to really show their distress as a way to get others to come to them and fulfill their needs. So, for example, they may, as a very small baby, have learned that people didn't always come to you if you cried, but if you cried and cried and cried and cried and really kind of extreme, then people would come eventually. And so they've learned that they have to have that hugely strong emotional reaction in order for people to pay attention to their needs and care about making sure that they're okay. So, why is this a problem in a relationship? Well, someone who's got an anxious attachment style has learned that they have to fight for attention, they have to push. They sometimes feel that they have to push boundaries, and that can make them clingy and often jealous. And it's not just that that's unpleasant or uncomfortable for the person they're in a relationship with, it's also very painful for them. Feeling jealous, feeling clingy, feeling as though you have to fight and push all the time to get what you need isn't a nice feeling. It feels uncomfortable, it feels unsafe. And so having an anxious attachment style is something that you will potentially want to work on at a future date. The next attachment style that we're going to look at is avoidant attachment. And this is about as prevalent as anxious attachment, so around about 20% of the population, give or take. And having an avoidant attachment style means that you tend to pull back and be very self-contained. Avoidant attachment typically comes when a young child learns that their needs just aren't going to be met. Consistently, there will be some of their needs that will not be met by the adults around them. And so they learn that they just need to get on with it. They need to meet those needs themselves. So where someone who had an anxious attachment style learned that they had to cry really hard to get attention, someone with an avoidant attachment style learned that crying did no good. So I might as well not. And again, that sounds like quite a strong, quite an independent way of dealing with things. But what it leads to is putting up boundaries between yourself and others and never trusting others and not being able to build up the deep emotional connections that would be more fulfilling for you. So again, someone who has an avoidant attachment style is likely to have some habits that cause their partners pain. So they pull away, they don't connect, they keep things to themselves, they deal with their own problems without sharing, but it's also quite a painful place to be. So again, an avoidant attachment style is something that you can work on, and we are going to address how to deal with both avoidant and anxious attachment styles in later videos, I promise. Final attachment style that we're going to talk about is a secure attachment. Now, this is the majority of the population. 55-60%-ish of the population are securely attached. This means that when they were growing up, they learned that if they were unhappy, there were people out there who cared about them. They learned that overall, people could be trusted. Adults, people who said they loved you, meant it. They were willing to put their own needs aside and fulfill yours. And so they've learned to trust. They've learned to connect with others. They've learned to be emotionally vulnerable. It's important to point out that someone who has a secure attachment style, it's not that they never feel insecure in their relationships. Of course they do. Of course they have bad relationships. Of course they struggle with things. And of course there are times when they don't know what their partner thinks of them, or they worry that they care about their partner more than their partner loves them, whatever it might be. But the thing is, it's not a consistent problem that happens in the same way every relationship. So in some ways, this does present its own challenges. Someone who has an anxious attachment style or an avoidant attachment style probably knows the problems that they're going to see in every relationship. Someone with a secure attachment style gets to make new mistakes or have new difficulties and new challenges in every relationship. But the difference is that they are absolutely confident that they have the resources to overcome them, and they feel that their partner is probably going to be on their side in that process. So we're going to talk later about how to be more securely attached and how to learn to trust people, how to learn to open up, or how to learn to really just assume that other people are there to meet your needs as well as their own. That's it for now. Hopefully you've got a good idea of what attachment styles are, why they're important, and maybe you're starting to be ready to identify your own attachment style or the attachment style of someone who's close to you. We do have videos on how to identify your own attachment style, so feel free to check those out. Please let me know in the comments what you think. Is this useful? Is there anything else you'd like us to go into? Let me know. I love hearing from you guys. And in the meantime, do like and subscribe.